In October of 2021, several cave explorers ventured into a network of deserted mines in northern Arizona. This was nothing unusual for them, it was how they spent their free time. They lowered themselves into a shaft that had been sealed by time and neglect, a place the world had long forgotten. Inside, the air felt thick and lifeless, heavy with moisture and the breath of old stone. As one flashlight swept across the wall, it caught something that did not belong. It wasn't rock. It wasn't rusted machinery. It was two sleeping bags pressed tightly together. They lay side by side, unnaturally still. What froze the explorers in place was the stitching, crude, uneven seams pulled shut by thick thread, done by hand. Authorities were called immediately. When the bags were opened, what remained inside confirmed a nightmare. The bodies were identified as Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards, missing for 11 years. Yet this grim discovery solved nothing. Instead, it fractured reality further. Their fate became a puzzle with no clear edges, no witnesses, no suspects, no rational path from beginning to end. To trace how the silence began, we must return to June of 2010. Ray Larson was 26. Nicole Edwards was 24. They were an ordinary couple living in Phoenix, together for nearly 2 years. Ray worked as a graphic designer. Nicole was a nurse. They weren't thrill-seekers or survivalists. They didn't chase danger. They simply loved the quiet rituals of nature, setting up a tent, sharing a meal outdoors, watching stars burn holes in the night. That summer, they planned a brief escape into northern Arizona. The plan was simple. Drive north. Visit the Grand Canyon. Wander a little. Come home. They packed lightly but carefully, a tent, sleeping bags, food, water, a small stove, and a camera to capture memories meant to last. To them, it was just another gentle weekend away, nothing more. They left Phoenix early Friday morning in Ray's silver Toyota Corolla, recently inspected and in good shape. No warnings were given. No strange feelings were shared. Friends later said they were cheerful, relaxed, and excited for the road ahead. The last confirmed sighting came on Saturday, June 12. They stopped at a gas station near the south entrance of Grand Canyon National Park. The cashier remembered nothing unusual, just a young couple passing through. Gas. A bottle of water. A bag of chips. Ray behind the wheel. Nicole studying a map. Calm. Quiet. Unremarkable. No one appeared to follow them. No other vehicles stood out. After refueling, they drove south along Highway 180. From that moment on, the trail went dark. Nicole was supposed to call her mother Sunday evening. It was their custom, every trip ended with that call. When it didn't come, concern was delayed by hope. Maybe they were running late. Maybe there was no signal. But when Monday morning arrived and neither of them showed up for work, fear replaced patience. Calls to their phones went unanswered. Straight to voicemail. Families reached out to hospitals and police departments along the expected route. No accidents. No reports. No trace of a couple matching their description. By Monday night, missing persons reports were filed, and the machinery of investigation began to turn. Cell phone records showed both devices had been powered off since Saturday. The last signal placed them near the gas station. Their bank cards told the same story, no activity beyond that final fuel purchase. This absence spoke loudly. People who wander, delay, or change plans still leave digital footprints. Ray and Nicole left none. Search teams spread across the region. Officers and volunteers scoured Highway 180. Helicopters traced the land from above. Northern Arizona stretched endlessly, forests folding into canyons, deserts swallowing sound. Days passed with nothing to show for it. No vehicle. No clothing. No sign of life or struggle. It was as if the earth itself had taken them. Then, 1 week later, on June 19, a Forest Service patrolman found the car. The Corolla was parked at the mouth of an abandoned logging road, far south of their last known location. The road disappeared into dense forest, barely visible from the highway, as though it resisted being found. The car was locked. No damage. No forced entry. Inside, the questions multiplied. Everything was there. The tent. 2 sleeping bags. Backpacks packed with clothes. Their wallets, cash, and bank cards rested untouched in the glove compartment. On the front seat lay an unfolded map and the same bag of chips, partially eaten. The keys sat on the driver's seat. There were no signs of violence. No blood. No chaos. It looked as though they had simply stepped out of the car and never returned. Why leave everything behind? Why walk away without phones, water, or supplies? The logic collapsed under its own weight. Dogs were brought in. They caught a scent, followed it briefly, then lost it on rocky ground where the trail vanished, just as Ray and Nicole had. And once again, the silence closed in. No tracks were discovered beyond the boot prints belonging to Ray and Nicole, leading away from the vehicle and into nothingness. There were no tire marks suggesting another car had stopped nearby. Forensic teams dusted every surface of the Corolla. Only 2 sets of fingerprints emerged, their own. No strangers. No intruders. The idea that they had simply wandered off and become lost collapsed almost immediately. Everything required to stay alive had been left behind. Water. Supplies. Shelter. The notion of a planned disappearance made even less sense. Why abandon cash, identification, and personal belongings? Some briefly whispered the word suicide, yet that theory unraveled just as quickly. Why drive so far only to leave the car hidden and walk away? Kidnapping rose to the top of the list, but even that explanation refused to fit cleanly. There were no signs of violence near the vehicle. No chaos. No interruption. If something had happened, it had occurred elsewhere. Investigators considered another possibility. Perhaps the couple had stopped to help someone, or were intercepted by individuals pretending to be authorities. This line of thinking gained traction. Detectives began retracing Highway 180, questioning anyone who might have been on the road that day. Surveillance footage from gas stations and nearby shops, spanning a 100-mile radius, was reviewed frame by frame. It was an enormous undertaking. A few witnesses recalled seeing a silver sedan, but memory offered no substance. No strange encounters. No suspicious vehicles. No one following them. Every lead dissolved. The investigation stalled. Search efforts dragged on for weeks. Law enforcement and volunteers swept the wilderness again and again. They entered abandoned cabins, peered into derelict structures, and climbed down ravines that barely broke the forest floor. The land yielded nothing. Eventually, the organized search was suspended. Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards were moved into the cold case files. Their photographs, bright smiles frozen in time, remained pinned to walls and bulletin boards. Families waited. They believed. But with every passing year, hope thinned. 11 years went by with no movement. No breakthroughs. No voices emerging from the silence. It felt less like a mystery and more like erasure, as though the world itself had chosen to forget them. And in a way, that forgetting mirrored the truth. Time continued forward. Dust settled on the case files. Occasionally, a new detective in the cold case unit would reopen the folder, read every report, examine every photograph, only to arrive at the same conclusion. There was nothing to pursue. Not a single loose thread. The absence of evidence was almost disturbing. In an era where every action leaves a digital shadow, Ray and Nicole vanished completely. Their story migrated to online forums devoted to unsolved disappearances. From around the globe, strangers speculated, weaving theories that grew darker and more extreme. Some imagined a traveling predator, stalking highways in search of tourists. Others believed the couple had crossed paths with an illicit operation hidden deep in the woods and paid the price for seeing too much. Authorities examined these ideas, comparing details to cases nationwide. No connections surfaced. Background checks revealed nothing unusual. No criminal ties. No secret lives. They were exactly who they appeared to be, ordinary people. Among online investigators, one theory rose above the rest, that Ray and Nicole encountered someone who lived far from society. A recluse. A man who did not want to be found. Perhaps a veteran scarred by war, perhaps something far worse. According to this version, the couple unknowingly stepped onto his territory. A weapon could have compelled them to comply without resistance, explaining the untouched car and the absence of struggle. He might have held them. He might have killed them. The idea felt plausible, yet it remained unprovable. Northern Arizona is vast. Those who wish to disappear there often succeed. Their families never stopped searching. They spoke to the media. They hired private investigators. They kept a website alive year after year, refusing to let the names fade. But time is relentless. Hope dims, even in the most faithful hearts. The story slowly transformed into legend, a warning whispered about a couple claimed by the forest. Then, in October 2021, the forest finally answered. The chain of events began with 3 amateur cavers, seasoned in their quiet obsession. Week after week, they devoted their free time to searching through forgotten mines scattered across the region, remnants of a gold rush era long buried by history. Many of these shafts dated back to the 19th century, erased from modern maps, their entrances sealed by rockfalls, soil, and creeping vegetation, as if nature itself wished to conceal them. That day, they came upon one such opening. It was barely visible, choked with stones and tangled brush. Everything about it suggested abandonment beyond memory. With effort and patience, they cleared a narrow passage and revealed a vertical drop plunging straight into darkness. They estimated the shaft to be roughly 100 feet deep, dangerous, but irresistible. Ropes were anchored. The descent began. The most experienced among them volunteered to go first. As he lowered himself, the air grew heavy, thick with moisture and decay. His headlamp traced pale arcs across mineral-stained walls, silent witnesses to time. When his boots touched bottom, he scanned the ground. Broken rock and debris littered the floor. Then his light reached the far edge of the shaft, and stopped. 2 elongated shapes rested against the wall. For a fleeting moment, he assumed they were old refuse, discarded sacks left behind decades ago. But as he moved closer, a sense of dread settled in his chest. They were sleeping bags. One blue. One green. Dust-covered, faded, but not ancient. And then he saw what made his breath catch. The bags were not simply closed. They were sewn shut from top to bottom, crudely bound with thick, coarse thread, like twine pulled tight by an unsteady hand. The stitches were uneven, deliberate, unmistakably human. And beneath the stale air of the mine, there lingered another scent, faint, but undeniable. Decay. He did not touch a thing. Instead, he radioed upward, his voice controlled but urgent. They needed to leave. Now. Authorities had to be called. Back at the surface, they searched desperately for a signal strong enough to carry a call. When it finally connected, 911 was dialed. The county sheriff arrived with several deputies, navigating rough terrain by SUV and finishing the journey on foot. The isolation of the site made one thing clear immediately: this was no ordinary discovery. The area was sealed off. A forensic unit was summoned. Progress was slow and meticulous. First, the descent had to be made safe. Only then did a forensic specialist lower himself into the shaft to document the scene. Photographs were taken from every angle. Samples of soil and air were collected. Nothing was rushed. Extraction came next. Each sleeping bag was raised individually, suspended by pulleys and guided with care, as though disturbing them too quickly might shatter something unseen. Once above ground, they were sealed in airtight containers and rushed to the medical examiner's lab. By then, investigators already suspected the truth. No other couples had vanished under similar circumstances in the region over the past 11 years. The confirmation came swiftly and definitively. Inside the bags were human remains. Dental records removed all doubt. Ray Larson. Nicole Edwards. The search that had spanned more than a decade had ended. Yet the real investigation had only just begun. The autopsy findings stunned even veteran detectives. Ray Larson had died from catastrophic head trauma, at least one powerful blow delivered from behind with a heavy object. The injury was instantly fatal. Nicole Edwards' remains told a different, but equally violent story. Damage to the fragile bones of her neck revealed death by strangulation. This was not an accident. This was murder. Their disappearance was no longer a mystery of chance, but a deliberate act of brutality. Still, the most unsettling revelation came from the forensic entomologist and pathologist. Studying insect activity and the condition of the remains, they reached a conclusion that reshaped everything. Ray and Nicole had not been placed into the sleeping bags and discarded immediately after death. Their bodies had rested elsewhere, hidden, for at least 24 hours, possibly up to 48. This was not a spontaneous act committed in the wilderness. It was calculated. They were killed, then concealed, then moved. Someone had taken time. Someone had chosen what would be seen, and what would remain hidden. Only afterward were the bodies carried to the forgotten mine, sealed inside sleeping bags, stitched shut, and cast into the shaft. That single realization shattered every simple explanation. This was no impulsive act, no accidental crossing with a deranged hermit deep in the woods. What emerged instead was the outline of intention, methodical, deliberate, and disturbingly patient. Someone had invested time and effort to make Ray and Nicole disappear. But the questions multiplied. Why go to such lengths? Where were the bodies kept for an entire day, or two? The bags bore no marks of transport. The remains showed no clues that revealed how they were moved. What had seemed like progress now revealed itself as a deeper descent. The investigation had not broken through, it had crossed into darker territory. At last, the police had answers about how Ray and Nicole died. Yet the why and the who remained hidden, just as they had for 11 years. The recovery of the bodies did not bring closure. It reopened the wound, placing investigators in an even tighter maze. The most troubling detail was the gap itself, the silent window of 24 to 48 hours between murder and concealment. That span of time spoke volumes. This was not a panicked attacker dumping evidence in haste. This was someone with access to shelter, privacy, and control, a place where two bodies could remain unseen for days. A basement. A locked garage. A remote shed. Somewhere ordinary enough to escape notice, yet isolated enough to protect a secret. This realization shifted the focus sharply. The killer was almost certainly local, or at least deeply familiar with the area. The idea of a passing predator or transient drifter began to fade. Investigators returned to the beginning, reassembling the crime piece by piece. Two locations became central: the abandoned road where the car was left, and the mine where the bodies were found. By road, nearly 50 miles separated them. Parts of that journey ran through rough forest tracks, not meant for casual travel. Making that trip required the right vehicle, an SUV or pickup, and an intimate understanding of the land. More importantly, it required knowledge of the mine itself, a place erased from maps and hidden by time. You would not find it by accident. Once again, the evidence pointed inward, toward someone who belonged to this landscape. Police reopened archives and widened the net. Property owners within dozens of miles were scrutinized. Old records were pulled. Anyone living in the area in 2010 with a history of violence came under review. Hunters. Former miners. Forestry workers. Anyone whose life had woven itself into these woods. The effort was enormous, and fruitless. No clear motives surfaced. No alibis cracked. Attention turned back to what little the mine had yielded. The sleeping bags and the coarse thread that sealed them became the center of forensic focus. But they offered no voice. The nylon was mass-produced. The twine was common. Nothing distinctive. Nothing rare. DNA testing was attempted, though time had been cruel. 11 years underground had stripped away almost everything. A few fragments were recovered, too degraded to identify. No usable fingerprints. No hair. No trace that could name the one responsible. Either the killer had been careful, or fate had shielded him. Another wall. Another silence. With no physical leads, detectives turned again to people. Witnesses were re-interviewed. The gas station attendant. Campers. Residents of small towns stretched along the highway. But memory erodes. After more than a decade, recollections had blurred into uncertainty. A new public appeal was issued, this time precise and targeted. Investigators asked for anything: headlights cutting through forest darkness, the sound of an engine where none should be, movement near the mine in June of 2010. Someone, somewhere, might have seen something without realizing its meaning. Tips came in. Many of them. None of them useful. With evidence exhausted, the focus shifted inward, toward the mind of the killer. The emerging profile was unsettling. This was someone capable of extraordinary violence, yet governed by restraint and calculation. Two lives taken in two different ways, one by sudden, devastating force, the other through intimate, silent pressure. Brutality guided by control. And somewhere between those acts, time passed. Quietly. Intentionally. This pattern suggests the killer acted alone. Ray was likely eliminated first, the greater physical threat, before attention turned to Nicole. Whoever did this possessed enough strength to move two bodies without assistance. More than that, he showed discipline. Each phase followed the next with intention: the killings, the concealment, the transport, the disposal. Nothing here was impulsive. Everything was arranged. Yet the central question, why, remained unanswered. It was not theft. Money, documents, and valuables were untouched in the car. Sexual motive could not be confirmed. Time had erased the certainty needed for such a conclusion, leaving that possibility suspended in silence. There was no sign of vengeance. No grudges surfaced. No hidden lives were uncovered. Ray and Nicole carried no known enemies, no buried conflicts. What remained was the most unsettling explanation of all. They were not targeted. They were chosen by chance. Two ordinary people crossing paths with someone who wore a normal face by day and another beneath it. A predator who blended into everyday life, yet knew these forests intimately, paths, roads, forgotten places, using the land not for refuge, but for control. Perhaps he flagged them down. Perhaps they stopped voluntarily, drawn by scenery, curiosity, courtesy. The first moments of that meeting are lost forever. But the ending is not. It was violent. Final. And instead of fleeing in fear, the killer acted with calm resolve. He brought the bodies to a place of safety known only to him. There, time passed. A day. Maybe two. Waiting. Watching. Choosing the moment. Sewing the bodies into sleeping bags was not merely practical, it was symbolic. A final erasure. Faces removed. Lives reduced to sealed forms. Cargo instead of people. Even now, the murders of Ray Larson and Nicole Edwards remain unsolved. The case has cooled once more, though it now bears the weight of its true name, double homicide. Investigators understand how they died. They understand how they were hidden. What they do not have is a path to the one who did it. Their families were returned what little could be given, the remains, but not the truth. Not justice. The man who kept his secret for 11 years may still walk free. He may share sidewalks, offices, conversations. A neighbor. A coworker. A familiar face in a small Arizona town. Someone who, on a June day in 2010, crossed paths with a young couple on a forest road, and then went home as if nothing had happened. And the Arizona desert continues to keep its secrets.